Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Casual Sports Podcast. I'm back at it again here. I'm Alek Koberna. That's Matt Morrison, or should we say Mr. Derrick Henry? Because, I mean, you've been carrying this squad this week, Matt. And much
Oh
like Derrick
yeah,
Henry carries the Titans for most of the
yeah,
season, although
oh
they've
yeah,
been holding their own with him being out. He'll be
oh
back,
yeah.
though, next weekend. So we'll get into that once that time comes back around. But, Matt, you've been carrying the show this week. I'm back in it,
I do.
finishing out strong. You better get used to it, man. That's how it's going to be.
Oh man, I like doing it. I like being in the spotlight.
Oh, dear. We're giving him too much power on the show. You know,
That's
it's
not
really
bad.
terrible when you're the only one on because if you start saying something wrong, I can't just, go ahead and take him out of the stream or whatever. He has to
It's
stay in. And
there.
he's Matt. If you start digging yourself a hole on one of those, you got to get yourself out of it.
I know.
All right. Well, with that being said, let's get into the finale of our college football saga for the year. College football top 10, the final edition. And I mean, we had just a fantastic football season, Matt. I mean, everything pretty much played out nearly perfectly besides the college football playoff. I mean, bowl games were spectacular. The semifinal was a complete dud. The national championship, the first half sucked, and the second half was actually pretty phenomenal when you talk about just the way the both
Stenson
teams
Bennett.
played. As much as we don't like the teams that were in it or the outcomes of the game, because frankly, in that game, I was more pulling for Alabama when you got one of the greatest head coaches of all time out there, and Nick Saban, if not the greatest of all time. It's kind of hard to sit there and root against him when he's done so much for the sport in the last 15 years. So he finally lost to one of his. Actually, he's lost to both or two different of his former coaches this season. Obviously, Texas A&M earlier this year, and now to Kirby Smart, who was on Alabama's coaching staff just 6-7 years ago. I mean, it really isn't that far removed. The Kirby Smart era went right into Georgia, and since Kirby Smart really stepped on campus there, that Georgia team has been cream of the crop in the SEC.
Oh yes, they have. I mean, they've had good teams every year. This is just the first year that they, took down Alabama.
This was the first time they were able to make it deep enough, because most of the time we're talking going to that SEC championship game, you got 1 or 2 loss Georgia going into it against Alabama, and you're like, well, they have to win to get in, and Alabama just goes, no, we're taking the championship. See you next time. And this time we got a different story to go around. So let's go ahead. Number 10, Matt. Any guesses on who's number 10 in our rankings here to start things out?
I don't know.
All right. Well, it's the Ole Miss Rebels. They get in here. By no thanks to either you and I, Mike actually is the sole reason Ole Miss made our top 10. He had them sitting up at number 8. Our final few teams had some very clear discrepancies in it. So that 10 spot was pretty much up for grabs because I had Pitt at 10. You had Oklahoma at 10. He had Utah at 10. None of those 3 teams made our final top 10. Huh?
I didn't put Utah in either.
No, you put Oklahoma
or Ole Miss.
Well, he had Utah at 10.
Yeah, I remember.
And so, we get down to our final 10 here, and none of our people that we voted for number 10 actually made the list here. Mike took the reach and threw Ole Miss up at 8 into the rankings here, despite them losing 21-7 their final game of the season against Baylor, who is obviously higher up in the rankings. Obviously, I think there's a big takeaway from that Ole Miss game with, Matt Corral going down, and you kind of take that loss maybe with a little bit of a grain of salt. But I wasn't really over impressed with that Ole Miss team throughout the season. Going to my final college football rankings, I didn't have them inside my top 10. They lose. I see no reason for me to have promoted them up in this time frame. So with that being said, I mean, they had a great season. Just to me, they didn't finish a top 10 team in my book. Your whole season is great and whatnot. I don't care if you have guys sitting out of your bowl games, because you know what? You still got to show up to play. If you're a Power 5 school, you better have the guys sitting behind you in second and third on the depth chart that can take over and play at a high level. This is Division I FBS Power 5 football. And you're a top 25 program. I mean, you got probably a top 25 coach in Lane Kiffin. You have to have guys that can produce in your 2 and 3 spots. I'm sorry, but if you have one guy opt out, it shouldn't make or break your team. To me, that is why this team wasn't top 10 in my book. Mike's not here to throw his argument up there for them being up at number 7 in his books, but they want to be number 10 here, Matt.
I mean, just that bowl game loss, I mean, that did hurt. I mean, Matt Corral, that hurt even more. I mean, honestly, I was kind of mad at all these players opting out, guys like Pickett and, other players as well. But now you look at it like this is why they opt out. Now Matt Corral is hurt. I don't know how serious it is. They say it's a sprained ankle, but still, he still got hurt. So, I mean, you have to look at that. Like, he didn't play it safe or anything. I like his attitude. Like, I played to the end. But I can also see why other players don't want to play. But I like he came in here and gave some heart and still played.
Right. I mean, I think this almost does open that up into the discussion of players opting out. And I think one part of that, Kirk Herbstreit criticized the players at one point here during Bowl Mania, this whole last month and a half of bowl play, saying that just this generation of players doesn't care about football anymore. They don't love the sport like the players evolved. But in my opinion, it kind of is in a similar water as what we saw with the NBA. When LeBron made that decision to go down to Miami, he created this new NBA that we saw where there was greater player movement. There was freedom to go around. And the biggest thing that was lost out of that was loyalty. But it was always loyalty from the players to the teams. One thing you see in every single sport, players love their teams. Zach Ertz is the most recent example of a guy who loves their team, has given them nothing but loyalty, and then at the end of the day, the team moved him like another, piece on a chessboard. To these teams, they're nothing but money makers, pawns in their game, dollar bills in their wallet. To me, if the teams never show, extreme loyalty to players, I mean, go into let's see here. The last draft class, this current class of quarterbacks coming in college football. Drew Allard of Penn State. If it's not for Quinn Ewers, most likely Drew Allard is an Ohio State commit, right? He was getting offers. We were looking into this a couple of weeks ago, and he was drawing offers and interest from Ohio State. Ohio State gets Quinn Ewers. Ohio State drops off the planet, and Drew Allard never hears from them again. So the schools find these guys as replaceable as that. I mean, if a guy goes down injured, his backup comes in. If his backup performs, cool, that starter's out the window. So to me, why should the players have to show loyalty to schools that don't care about them? And, in a similar respect to that as well, when it comes down to, showing loyalty to the coaches show no loyalty to these players whatsoever. I mean, 1 minute you're a team entering into the college football playoff, potentially here, or going into a New Year's Six bowl game like Notre Dame or Oregon, and your head coach transfers out in the middle of the season, or like in the middle of this bowl mania chaos to go start recruiting somewhere else. Nobody scrutinizes the coaches for opting out of bowl games, basically, going to start coaching somewhere else. But yet the players want to get hated on every week for, transferring out to seek better opportunities or go somewhere where they feel valued. Or, hey, you know what? These are 17, 18-year-old kids who are going thousands of miles away from their home. Sometimes, kids are a little homesick. Or, if a coach goes somewhere else and they want to follow, it's probably because that guy came into their living room, promised them, hey, you come with me, I'll find you a way to get you to the NFL. I'll get you out of your
And then they just follow them.
I'll give you, opportunity after opportunity. That coach came in there and made promises in his living room. If that coach leaves, why should the player stay at the school and some new coach who has guaranteed him nothing, to come and basically decide the fate of his life? So, as much as you want to talk about, oh, man, these players opting out, it's ruining college football. You know what? You got nobody to blame but the coaches and the media. I mean, the media makes things awful. I mean, look down at Oklahoma for starters. And, they got their Spencer Rattler. He's riding all season. He's doing okay. The media is giving him absolute hellfire all season long, telling everybody who wants to listen just how bad he is. And then they finally pull him out, and then you yell at him for transferring out. It's like, oh, come on, you got to stay there and compete. And that's all the media propagating all of this information to go, oh, Spencer Rattler sucks. Oh, Spencer Rattler's a coward for opting out. He can't handle competition. There are certain players where maybe you look at and say,
you don't know what those players are going
is having an impact on them, but that is the vast minority of players transferring into this portal. I mean, we are seeing record high in transfer portals, but so what? I mean, with COVID going on, some players just want to be closer to home, or they want to get out of a certain school because they don't like certain policies or what's going on with school politics, or hey, maybe they're actually switching majors. At the same time, people want to yell at these guys like they're NFL players. They're kids trying to decide a life for themselves and trying to figure out what the hell they're going to do after football. Because out of everyone that goes to the NFL, there's 250, 300 players a year out of the 6,000 that play college football that make it to the NFL. Everyone wants to talk, oh man, we've had 2,000 guys transfer out this season. Yeah, that makes sense, because you know what? Go ahead and I guarantee you, most people watching this, how long did it take you to graduate from college? 6, 7, 8, 9 years? Yeah. People flip their majors all the time and switch what they want to do. It's so hard to go and ask a 17-year-old, hey, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? And you better make it the right decision the first time, because you're going to get yelled at by every single person in the media and that and your teammates and your friends that you're making the wrong decision and you're ruining their lives and stuff like that. I mean, you're asking a child to go make a life-breaking decision. So this whole scrutinizing players for opting out of bowl games or transferring to a different school, it's nonsense. It's baloney. It's crap. Whatever you want to call it. These are kids trying to make the best decision for their life. And as I said, there's that's the thing. Players that gets taken in the NFL draft every year. Yeah. You know what? If I'm not being given an opportunity at one school, okay, I'm going to go to a school where I can compete and maybe either get better reps in to make myself a better player and then transfer back up. Hello, Stenson Bennett, by the way, who's probably turned himself into a potential 3rd or 4th round pick in the NFL draft with his recent performances, who, by the way, I believe 2 seasons ago was at a JUCO college, in somewhere in Georgia. I mean,
I read about it the other day.
The best players, have wild stories. It's not a straight and clear path for every single person to get to the same spot. If that was the case, the world would be boring.
It would be boring. And, going on what you said, I mean, these guys are kids. Most of them are. They're there to, experiment, to, find out what they want to do, like you said. And if they want to opt out, I mean, homesick or whatever, or they're just ready to get on with their career, if they're that good and they're going to be drafted in the NFL, I get that one last game. You don't want anything to happen. Maybe they're in a financial situation. They just want to go in and make the big money. I get that. I mean, that's their career right there. So,
Matt, I mean, here's the other thing with the opting out of bowl games that I think people never look at the big picture. Imagine spending every day of your entire life working for one goal, and you come down to one final day. Say there's say you're going to work and you're like, oh man, I'm so close to getting a really big promotion. And it seems like I'm a shoo-in. They're going to announce it next week. And you decide, oh man, you know what? I'm going to drive through a blizzard, the week before I get this big promotion at work. You're driving through the blizzard, car accident, you lose your legs, you can't work ever again, and all of a sudden you're out of work, you don't get the promotion, everything you ever worked for in your entire life gone in an instant. That is what this is. They call college football collisions a car crash for a reason. These are life-threatening hits sometimes. I mean, you saw Ryan Shazier in the NFL nearly lose the ability to walk a couple of years ago. You saw a punt returner at UCF, I think 4 years ago, he was knocked unconscious for 25 minutes, laying on the field. People thought the kid was basically dead. Matt, you and I were calling high school football earlier this year, and there was a guy knocked out on the sidelines for 35 minutes. This is some people's entire lives come down to one game, and if they can opt out of it to save themselves a potentially career-threatening injury, life-threatening injury, and still get to the same place as if they had played it, you go ahead and ask most people would say, yeah, I think I'm going to opt out of that game if I can just go ahead and guarantee you that you're going to tear your ACL in that game. Jamison Williams in the national championship. I'm going to guarantee you.
I know that's the national championship,
right before your chance to go to the NFL. Are you going to go, you know what? I think I'm going to play that game and take the injury. You're going to go, I'm going to opt out of that, and I'm going to take my spot in the NFL. I'm going to take my couple $1 million, and I'm going to put that away, and my family's going to be set for life. I mean, come on. This at the same time when this is, college and, it's, college athletics, student athletes. At the other part of this, it's a business decision, and sometimes you got to do what's best for you because the only one that's looking out for you at the end of the day, 9 times out of 10 is yourself. So these players are looking out for themselves because nobody else will. But we have to continue to move on here. We got to get past this. We could go on for 45 minutes in it. Let's go to number 9 on our countdown here. Number 10 was the Ole Miss Rebels. Number 9, the Michigan State Spartans.
That's who I was going to guess at 10.
What was that?
That's who I was going to guess at 10. Yeah. I was going to guess Michigan State. But
yeah, this was a team that actually was nearly unanimously voted number 9. You had them sitting at 8. Mike and I both had them at 9 on our list here. I really like them. I think they finished out strong. Even without Kenneth Walker, yes, they were going up against a Pitt squad that didn't have Kenny Pickett. That is what it is. As I said, you're a Division 1 Power 5 school. You better have somebody that can, step up for you. Michigan State was without a doubt one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in college football. That's going to make a pretty darn big impact. But, as I said before this game going into it, I think the quarterback position impacted it a little bit more than necessarily the running back position did. So, Michigan State, they did everything right. They finished out the season strong. And, I think if you had told this team early in the season they'd finish top 10, I think they'd be okay with that after, having a terrible season last year during the COVID year, second year under Mel Tucker. And, you starting off this season, you looked okay until you got to Nebraska, and then it's 23-20 in overtime. And then people started questioning you throughout the way that it's 20-15 against Indiana. You make the huge comeback against Michigan, but then Purdue comes in and spoiler makes the season. Then Ohio State blows you out and you nearly lose to Penn State and to end out the season. I think this team is really satisfied on where they are. Obviously, there's another step that they can take, to become an even better team next season. But I think with what they have, I think they're building something nice here. And I think Mel Tucker got the benefit of working with one of the best transfer players in the history of college football. I think you can pretty much put that on a platform. One of the best transfers from Wake Forest and Kenneth Walker. And now I'm interested to see, after everyone in the nation got to see what Mel Tucker could do, because that's obviously the biggest question every time you bring in a new head coach is, what can this guy do that was different from the last, especially coming off a dynasty quarterback in Mark D'Antonio, who, led this team through their glory years. I mean, it's hard to say.
He was there for a while.
State football, they were in Big Ten championships. They were competing on national levels. And now you're bringing in somebody new, and you always have question marks, especially with Mel Tucker, who is a super young, untested head coach. I mean, he went 5-7 at Colorado, comes to Michigan State. First season is a losing season, and the second season, he's in the running for a Big Ten championship and potentially a national championship. Michigan State's right where they need to be, and I'm very excited to see what they do in this offseason. This is one of my top 10 teams. I'm very excited to see what the future holds for the Spartans. The Big Ten is better when Michigan State is good.
Honestly, I totally believe that. Every time Michigan State has a good team, I think they made the playoff that one year.
Yeah, I think that was 2016 or 17.
Something like that. But every year Michigan State is good. It makes this Big Ten more enjoyable to watch because your big teams in the Big Ten are Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and then Michigan State. when they have to play each other, it makes the games, and they're good, it makes the games even more exciting to watch. Like, if Michigan State was just god awful, let's say they have like 3 wins on the season, and they're going in to play a top ranked Ohio State team, and Ohio State is favored to blow them out, I wouldn't want to watch that game.
No, I mean, this just adds competition. And if there's any one discussion to come out of this season, it's Big Ten Conference Realignment. We've seen the West part of the Big Ten really be kind of terrible for the last, 6 years?
Yeah.
It's been pretty dreadful. I mean, maybe Jonathan Taylor's Wisconsin that lost 50-some to nothing in the Big Ten championship against Ohio State. Really the last powerhouse team that came out of the Big Ten West. I mean, Northwestern had a good team in there. Minnesota's obviously been building. They're good. Iowa's always solid. But it just feels like you go in any one of those matchups. I mean, if I'm going Minnesota, Ohio State, or Minnesota versus Penn State, I'm taking the team in the eastern part of the conference because this division is just stacked at the top, but you always see a lot more balance top to bottom in the West. The East always has a fantastic top, crap bottom, and the West is always pretty even throughout with the crap bottom. And I think maybe if this opens up one thing that we'll talk about here probably in the next few weeks is what the Big Ten can do to change, how they can flip some teams around. That'll be a discussion for a later day, but, give Michigan State its credit for its fantastic season. And I'm interested to see what they do next year. Actually, I want to look into what your Peyton Thorne is, see how much longer this guy has with the team.
But
go ahead and talk.
Kenneth Walker is going to be a huge loss. He's going to the the NFL draft. But I like the guy who they had in that Pitt game. What was his name? Elijah, I believe. But they always have guys to step up, and I think Peyton Thorne will be back the next year when you're looking at it right there. But
yeah, I think he's a junior.
Let's look.
I'm looking into it here already. I got it loading up. Oh, he's actually only a sophomore quarterback. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He'll definitely be back next year. So, I think coming off of a 3,000-yard season, 27 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and, a QB rating on the season of 148.1, college football QBRs are definitely a little bit different. And I definitely think he's got a lot of room to grow. I think he's a very positive player to look at for next season. I think Michigan State might have their guy at quarterback, which is really something you haven't been able to say in a while. They've had okay quarterbacks. Last one that was consistent for them was Connor Cook. So we'll see if Peyton Thorne can be the next guy that really steps up for this team and can drive them to potentially either Big Ten championship or a national championship. Their in-state rival just got there for the first time. Michigan State claim the title next year, man. Go for it.
Yeah. Kirk Cousins was pretty good with Michigan State as well, but that's
just longer ago, though, Matt.
Yeah, that was just a little bit before Connor. I think Connor Cook was right after him, honestly.
Was he?
I don't know, because Connor Cook, I remember he got drafted by the Raiders, and that was it. You haven't heard from him since.
Okay, so Kirk Cousins was taken in the 2012 draft.
Yeah. Because I remember in 2011.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. That's crazy to think Kirk Cousins was right before Connor Cook. That feels very wrong.
I remember Kirk Cousins with the Hail Mary at Michigan State. I was like 11 years old or something. I don't know if you remember that.
That's now weird, he's old. Man. That's weird.
It's weird.
It definitely feels so wrong. Yeah, he hasn't played since 2020. He was in the XFL in the Houston Roughnecks. He was the backup quarterback to PJ Walker.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Wow. Well, we got to continue moving forward here. Number 8, Oklahoma State, the Cowboys. They put in a good fight against Notre Dame. They win the Fiesta Bowl 37-35. Spencer Sanders balled out in every which way. And, we talked about that game in depth. I really like this team. I think they're better than Notre Dame. I had them ranked at 7. Notre Dame was at 8 on mine. So I had these two teams flip-flop because I'll go ahead and just throw Notre Dame's 7 on this list as well. So with Oklahoma State at 8, Notre Dame at 7. I like Oklahoma State better. They won the head-to-head. To me, that's always the most important thing, especially when you finish out the season, because it's the final time we see these guys before they hit college, hit off-season, hit the camps. And, we know what their true potential is at the end of this season. So with that being said, I like Oklahoma State better. I think Notre Dame has a brighter future. I mean, as much as I like Spencer Sanders, I love Marcus Freeman as the new head coach. And, there's potential to potentially get some nice coaches out there as well. I mean, you've seen Ohio State really load up their coaching staff now. It was announced earlier today. It looks like Kerry Coombs will not be back at Ohio State next season. The offensive game of Ohio State has been completely overhauled, which is insane to think about with how amazing that offense was. But they named Brian Hartline passing game coordinator, gave him a nice raise, a well-deserved one at that too.
He'll be offensive coordinator before you know it.
Right, but I almost want to think out of this was Notre Dame could really benefit from a guy like Kerry Coombs coming onto the defensive staff. He's older. He's probably a little past his prime in coaching and what he can do. But I think for Notre Dame to compete at a higher level, they've always had problems back in that secondary. Kerry Coombs, if you can limit him to just being a secondary coach, I think he could do something nice for their squad, or maybe just even designate him to the safeties. Put him in a spot where maybe he can find the next Denzel Ward or something, because he was producing talent out of Ohio State for many years. So I think Notre Dame has a brighter future than Oklahoma State, but I think Oklahoma State right now is the better team, and they proved that in the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah, they did. I mean, they had that huge comeback against Notre Dame, and I mean, I watched that whole game, and I'm like, wow, Notre Dame's killing them, and here they come.
28-14 at halftime.
Yeah, so it was a great game to watch, and yeah, they deserved their spot where they are. So.
Well, moving on then, the team that was formerly number 1 in the college basketball rankings, I'm sure it's set to change after they get upset for the first time, but their football squad down in Waco didn't do too bad. The Baylor Bears, they defeated Ole Miss 21-7, and I think they have a lot to figure out in the offseason, but they're finding ways to win games, and I think with that being said, Baylor has a very bright future. They've always built this team off of defense, and I think they're starting to find out that if they play offense and they become dynamic, they can, win the Big 12. They can go to a national championship game. They can win New Year's 6 games. There's a lot of upside if this team creates an offense, because they've always relied on defense, just like Georgia always relied on defense, but they got in the big games and they always came up short. Baylor has slowly been building an offense with still a stellar defense on the other side of a lot of underrated players who probably won't go very high in the draft, but of just absolute talent and skill. And if they have an offense, this team is going to be right back up here in the top 10 next season. I'm hoping they can do that. But, the way they finished off the season, it's hard to say you got much better. There's a better team out there than this team who finished the season with, top 10 wins in 3 of their last 5 games. I mean, they're double digits over Oklahoma, 5 points over Oklahoma State, and then obviously double digits against Ole Miss. So fantastic finish to the season for Baylor, and give them credit for throwing that ball 17 times and had just 40 receiving yards in the entire game, and still coming away 21-7 against Ole Miss.
Yeah, I mean, great performance by them. Great season. I mean, they came up a couple games short. They almost could have made that playoff. Just they dropped a couple games, and that's the way it works. But yeah, great finish with them. I'm excited to see what they can do next year. So.
Yeah, I mean, very much so. I mean, I think if you definitely have to look at any one team in particular that you're on the lookout for next season, it's got to be Baylor as one of those teams just kind of under the radar that'll come into next season, probably ranked about 18, 19, I think. If I had to guess, that's where they're going to get put in the initial APs for next season. Are you looking up the way too soon rankings that came out for the AP?
No, I already looked at that.
Yeah. All right. Well, moving on our list, number 5, the Ohio State Buckeyes. This is pretty much the highest spot Ohio State could have earned unless they had absolutely blown out Utah. But with the college football playoff, the semifinals, they sucked as it is. But with Michigan being in that semifinal game and getting blown out, it's so hard to put Ohio State over Michigan because of what Michigan did to my Buckeyes. So with that being said, I had them at 5 behind Michigan. I want to value the head-to-heads to finish out this season as much as possible. I want those late season head-to-heads to matter as much. And, with that being said, if I have Michigan sitting at 4, which is where I had them, and the Buckeyes have to be 5. And to me, we talked about the Rose Bowl. I mean, we've talked that one to death already. I'm not going to go that much more into it. It was a phenomenal game for me. I think going ahead next season, if we're going to probably put out our top 10 look ahead schedule, so our way too early top 10, probably next week or week after, I'm probably having Ohio State sitting at 2 or 3 potentially, depending on who we see move themselves into the NFL draft here and put their names in the bidding for those 250 some draft picks. I definitely think Ohio State is one of those teams that is probably going to start the AP polls next season, probably number 3, number 2.
Yeah, they'd be around that area, I believe. And, there'll be some surprising teams popping up in there for me as well. I mean, you got to look at who's bringing in all the top recruits and stuff like that. So it's not based off like what happened this past season. It's based off what they have coming in for next season. That's what they base that off. So it should be exciting to see.
Right, and actually on ESPN, they're way too early top 25. They have Ohio State at number 2.
Yeah.
So this is
Georgia
definitely
one
you can expect. And then looking for Baylor on this list, they have them down at 16, right about where I said they were going to be.
Yeah.
They
don't even have Penn State in there.
Disrespected, and you're going to see the same overhyped
They don't even have
Penn
State in there.
Penn State? No.
Yeah, I don't even think they have them in there.
That's probably fair. 2 bad seasons in a row.
Yeah.
You're gonna clearly Sean Clifford is a terrible quarterback.
He's terrible.
That's the one thing you can take away.
They have to start Alar.
They need to start Alar. Yeah, they need to make a change.
They're gonna be starting that freshman running back they got. Man, I forget his name because Noah Kane has just entered the transfer portal. I think he did Monday. Yeah. So
that's okay. Your running game was just as bad as your passing game this season.
Yeah. So
you had no offense. Your team was built on defense. It always is. And when you have a good offense, you can.
It's just like Pittsburgh.
Right. Except your quarterback situation at Penn State is actually worse than the Steelers. So moving ahead, I kind of spoiled it. That team up north gets the 4 spot. Yeah, Michigan. They got the floor wiped with them in that semifinal game against Georgia, 34-11. You saw this team struggle. I mean, we went over these games already, so we're not going to go back into them. But they had a strong finish to the season, and despite that loss in the semifinal, which they clearly were overmatched. They won 42-3
saved his job.
Championship game. So you win against Ohio State 42-27, then Iowa 42-3. I mean, what a way to finish out the regular season. They stumble in the semifinal. We always see the semifinals be blowouts anyway. This is no surprise that a team was blown out. We were surprised it was Michigan getting blown out with the way they finished the season, but I think they're strong enough of a team that this one doesn't hurt them too bad with it. I think they come back strong next season. I think the most interesting story right now for Michigan is what the hell's going on with Harbaugh, man, whether or not he gets taken to the NFL. The Dolphins already said no, but Chicago, I know, has been in the talks, at least from what I've heard, of potentially looking at Harbaugh. I feel like he's a very interesting guy to look at for the NFL. I mean, as much as you talk about his college record, and he's really been bad at college, and not necessarily bad, but
this is his first good year.
To win the big games. This was his first great year. But you look at him in the NFL. He was in a Super Bowl. He has a winning record still as a head coach in the NFL. I think he's a guy. A lot of teams that need a head coach. I mean, there's 7 or 8 openings right now in the NFL. I think he's a guy that some of those teams maybe should take a look at.
And that really shows it right there that college isn't really what it used to be. That he'll leave because like you didn't see Bo Schembechler leaving for the NFL or Woody Hayes leaving. These coaches stayed there for a while. Okay, I know Nick Saban had a little stint to try it out, but he came right back because it didn't work out. But I don't know. Well, it's just not the same.
Harbaugh this entire time at Michigan, though, he's been running that pro style offense and of his olden days in the NFL, and he came back to his alma mater. He got them their Big Ten championship. by the way, the first Big Ten championship they've won since they put the divisions into the Big Ten Conference and started playing a Big Ten championship game. Michigan has never won it. So, I mean, it was always Ohio State coming out of this tier. And then even when they had their down years, it was Michigan State, who was taking those titles. This is the first time they had played in a Big Ten championship game and they won it. So Harbaugh has pretty much given everything he can at this point to this team. The next step would be putting them at a national championship level, which I don't know if they can do because you saw them on a national stage come up short. And I don't think Harbaugh is the guy that's willing to change enough to put them at that level. So I think moving forward, it's very interesting to watch what Harbaugh ends up doing this season. And I think it really impacts where this team falls in the initial AP rankings of next season. The way too early has them at at the 5 spot. I kind of agree with that and where they're sitting with, the talent they're going to have back. I think they're going to be a strong squad. They are losing their best defensive players, though. And that's always been the thing with Michigan. When their top guy is left, they never seem to have the right crew to come in next to replace it. I mean, with the loss of Hutchinson, it's going to be a while before they can find anybody that can live up to that level. I mean, you're seeing even Ohio State struggle to replace the names of the Bosas and Chase Young and Sam Hubbard and Cam Jordan. I mean, that defensive line for the last 10 years has been.
Wow, I forgot Cam Jordan went to Ohio State.
Talent. Yeah. I mean, NFL guy after NFL guy, came from that D line, and now you kind of saw a terrible D line this year. So, I mean, you see big name teams even struggle to put talent back on the field and find those guys that can produce. I mean, Ohio State brought in like the number 1 guys in a row at the defensive end spot, and JT Toimaloa and Jack Sawyer, and you didn't really see those guys on the field very much this season. So, I mean, I think moving forward for Michigan, they need to just find guys that can fit that spot for now. And they still need to get more dynamic on offense. They showed it in the Ohio State game that they can and they're willing, just not on a long-term basis. I'm going to see more out of that moving forward from this team. But I think overall, a fantastic season for Harbaugh, and the offseason should be interesting depending on what happens.
He would have been on his way out if he didn't beat Ohio State this year.
I think he probably would have been already hired to an NFL football team.
Oh yeah.
If he lost to Ohio State again, I think it would have been a self-decision. I don't even think the university would have. I think he would have moved on himself, gone back to the NFL where he had more success. But I'm interested to see if he wants redemption this season, decides to stick around and put his team right back up there and, have their revenge tour part 2.
Yeah. Like, I just realized something. Like, the whole big Celtics-Lakers rival, I mean, that's what Michigan Ohio State has finally been. Boston just destroyed the Lakers in the 60s, and that left a lot of players to leave and just not want to go back to Boston or everything. I don't think what was his name, Jerry West. I don't think Jerry West ever went back to the Garden after that. I mean, that's the same thing with this. Like, some coaches just leave. They're sick of losing to Ohio State, and they just leave. I mean, so. But they finally got
moving forward here on the list. We'll go through these last few. Cincinnati, they finished off 27-6 in that game. If they had an offense against Alabama, I think they would have won. But Desmond Ridder came out flat. I think he really hurt his draft stock in this game. Their wide receivers just couldn't get past the corners, and I think that was the biggest thing coming into the game. I took Cincinnati to win it. I knew it wasn't going to happen.
I liked watching them.
The talent discrepancy between the two offensively was the big separator there. I mean, you saw Cincinnati's offense going against Alabama's defense. It was no match. And then, Cincinnati's defense was good through the air against Bryce Young. I mean, they limited him to just getting, a cup. I mean, he's got 3 touchdowns in that game, but they all came in the red zone. And the entirety of Alabama's offense was led by Brian Robinson, who you saw in the Georgia get absolutely stopped. So I think there was a lot of question marks appear at the end of the season for Cincinnati, but with the way they finished off their season, I have to give them the 3 spot as well in this.
Yeah, I do. I mean, and a lot of people are saying, I know I mentioned this before, but a lot of people are saying, man, they should never put a group of 5 team in there ever again. Just go away. Don't ever say that ever again, because what they accomplished this year is unbelievable. They took down Notre Dame. They won all their games. And, like you said, if their offense would have showed up, they would have been right there with them, with Alabama.
Yeah. And you know what? I think if anything for Cincinnati, this is setting a very bright future for the next few years and their inevitable move into the Big 12. I mean, the Big 12 is losing a national competitor in Oklahoma, and they might be bringing in a better one, honestly, with this Cincinnati team. I think once Cincinnati reaches Big 12 status, starts getting more money. I mean, with the money that can flow into this program through the Big 12 and everything that can come out of it, for the first time in the state of Ohio's history, we're going to have 2 Power 5 teams. And I think that opens the door. You've already seen Luke Fickell steal in-state recruits from Ohio State. Fickell has a huge future ahead of him with this becoming a Big 12 school, an offensive-minded school with a phenomenal defense. Not to mention, he has the nephew of Ohio State coaching legend and Mike Tressel, who had a top 5 defense, as his defensive coordinator, who's obviously going to bring in more ties to the Akron area, to the Columbus area. And they are going to start pulling in a lot bigger recruits, better recruits. And you saw what Luke Fickell did with this group of guys who, if you look at, 5-star talent, 4-star talent in comparison to Alabama going to that game, it was nowhere close. Cincinnati had no business being there, and yet they did it. They beat Notre Dame. They got there. It was a 3-possession game. Yeah, sure. They got their ass handed to them, but you saw Ohio State get shut out. You saw Michigan State get shut out. You've seen teams like Washington get destroyed, Oregon get destroyed, Clemson get destroyed. That has never stopped them from looking right back at them next season. I see no problem with Cincinnati if they run the table again, not giving them another shot come down end of the season because, the American Conference, they've shown just as much strength as the Big 12 and the Pac-12 and even the ACC when it comes to having ranked teams. So I think Cincinnati, they're in the Power 6 conference in the American. They're moving to a Power 5 conference here in the next 5 years or so. I think they got the brightest future ahead of them pretty much out of any team within our probably top 10. I think Cincinnati has the biggest potential to grow.
They do.
Alabama can only get that much better. Georgia
now
can
a lot more recruits are going to want to go there too.
Michigan can probably get that much better. Ohio State can get that much better. Baylor can probably get, that much better. But Cincinnati, we don't even know where the glass ceiling of this team is. We don't know how big the potential of Cincinnati is. If they're already in a college football semifinal with a complete lack of 5-star talent, basically, can you imagine once they're in the Big 12, an actual Power 5 school, and become an actual Power 5 school and the money they can put into this program, extra scholarships and everything that they can put together once they enter that? This team, their ceiling is pretty much infinite at the moment because we have no idea what this school can do in the next few seasons.
We don't. We really don't. And now, if I was a top recruit, I would be looking to go to Cincinnati now too to see what Fickell has done there. He's going to draw in more people. So,
well, number 2 on our list, Alabama, the Crimson Tide. This one, pretty self-explanatory. They lose the national championship game. They were leading at halftime, and it's against the team that they kind of crapped on earlier this year. I think maybe they overlooked them a little bit, which is something you don't see often with a Saban-led team. But, Georgia takes the top spot here. They win the national championship. Congratulations to them. I wish we could have some fireworks popping up on screen. But how about this, Matt? One final special thing for the year to celebrate a national championship for Georgia. Bringing the bell out one final time this college football season. It was an upset. Georgia upset Alabama in the national championship game. So you got to ring the bell for the Dogs.
Win their first national championship since 1980. You know who was on that team? Herschel Walker.
Yeah,
that's the last time they won. It's been a minute. Yeah.
All right, moving on here in the show. We got to go through the rest of this show pretty quickly here, but NBA preview. The Golden State Warriors and the Milwaukee Bucks is the game a lot of people have been waiting for. Kind of saw Golden State slip up a little bit in the recent going. They took a loss here. They're 6-4 in the last 10. The Suns are now in first place by a full game in the Western Conference. Bucks have also been slipping, though. 2 straight losses, 6-4 in their last 10. They've been kind of poor on the road, 13-10 when they've left their home stadium. You haven't seen those same struggles from Golden State. They're 12-7 on the road. But I think these teams are not necessarily even because I think they're very differently built in terms of, the size for Milwaukee is out of this building. They have bigs all across the floor. And then you have the Western Conference team, the Golden State Warriors, who is your prototypical Western Conference team because they are the, team everybody designed after. 3-point shooting. They're going to play physical underneath, but they're not going to have size. And so, I think you're getting two very different styles. One of more the olden era Eastern Conference with Milwaukee and the young guns who can sling it in the Western Conference. And I think this is a very interesting matchup to go into. I'm going to go ahead and take my pick in it. I want to take Golden State. I know I took them earlier this week. It didn't pay off. I don't think this is a team that really loses too many in a row, so I'm going to take Warriors in this one.
Yeah, I'm going to go Warriors too, especially with the addition of Klay Thompson. I know he hasn't played in 2 years, but he's still Klay Thompson, honestly. He still has it. So, yeah, I'm going to roll with them too. They just dropped to the 2 seed. Phoenix Suns are now the number 1 seed in the West, but that's going to go back and forth all year. I can't wait for that playoff matchup. I hope they meet up, honestly. I'll be mad if that doesn't happen. But this should be pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. All right, here in the NHL, we're actually going to look at a pretty terrible game, but we haven't really looked at the teams on the season, at least not since the early stages. This one, we're going to take the bottom 2 teams of the Metropolitan Division, the Devils and the Islanders. Both teams are in the negative in scoring differentials. The Islanders, terrible on offense, pretty darn good on defense. They have the second least goals allowed in the Metropolitan Division. They've only allowed 80. Your top team in the Hurricanes, who are number 1, have allowed just 73. If New York had any sort of offense, they could very well be up there in the top 3 spots of the Metropolitan. I think they're a very talented team defensively, but offense, they've had nothing going on. The Devils, they have the opposite problem. Their offense is right up there with teams like the New York Rangers and the Blue Jackets, and teams like the Red Wings and other divisions. And they don't have any defense to go for it. They've allowed the most goals in the Metropolitan Division at 126. So I think you have 2 very different styles in this game, and I'm interested to see which one comes through.
Yeah, the Islanders, they've had a lot of games postponed. A lot of games postponed. Yeah. And they lost one of their star players, Eberle, to the Kraken in the expansion draft. And the dynamic duo was pretty much Matthew Barzal and Eberle. That they were offensive freaks. They were in the playoffs the past 3-4 years with these 2 guys. I remember I went to a playoff game against Pittsburgh and they just lit up the place. Their goaltender, they lost I forget his name. 1 second. But they lost some key guys. That's the point. And it's time for a rebuild season. Same thing with the Devils as well, because they have been up there in playoff mix as well, and they just finally can't keep up. So,
all right, you got to make your pick here, Matt. We're running out of time on the show. We got 7 more games to go through.
I'm gonna go the Flyers here, honestly. Or the Islanders.
Flyers aren't playing in this one.
Whatever.
The Islanders. All right, I'm taking Islanders in this one too. So moving on, college basketball. First one here tonight, 5 p.m. Seton Hall versus DePaul. I like DePaul a lot, actually. I think they're a very talented team. But Seton Hall is obviously a top 25 squad. I think they continue to roll. Give me Seton in this one.
Yeah, I got to go Seton Hall here. But look out for DePaul. There's small schools to look out for. How about Princeton? Well, I know we can't go into them, but Princeton has been playing very good basketball. Keep an eye out on Princeton. I know that may seem absurd, but look out for them.
Yeah, heard it here first. Look at Princeton basketball.
Princeton
basketball. You know what their record is right now? I'm looking it up. Oh, wow, they're first in the Ivy League.
Yeah.
12-3. 7-game win streak right now. All right.
So look at Princeton.
Hey, Matt, they beat UMBC, the team that pulled the only upset of the 16 over the 1.
I saw that.
UMBC Golden Retrievers.
So
look out. Oh wow, only one of their losses came to Minnesota.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Not a bad team to look out for. Good eye out there, Matt. All right, next one up here. Another game tonight. Ohio State and Wisconsin, battle of the Big Ten here. This is a huge game for Ohio State. They're 4-1 in conference, but you saw them slip up in their not last game before against Indiana. They're definitely recovering after taking nearly a month off of basketball, in which their final game before that hiatus over Christmas break was a 73-55 win over Wisconsin. I think they pull it again. It's a lot closer, but I like Ohio State to win it. I'm taking my Buckeyes.
Oh, yeah. I'm going Ohio State too, man.
You don't like picking against Ohio State, although Wisconsin, man, you got a top 5 scorer out there in Davis. He's a true talent.
Oh, he absolutely is, but I like Ohio State.
All right, next game tonight, BYU, the Cougars, taking on Gonzaga. Gonzaga, Matt, it feels like they're finally finding that rhythm that we've been kind of waiting for all season. BYU, though, they're the number one team in the West Coast Conference, and they're 14-3 overall, 2-0 in conference, a 15-point underdog in this game. I just think the one discrepancy between these two teams is Gonzaga's pretty much had the same record against teams that we would consider good, and Liberty has done theirs against, a pretty weak schedule out there. I mean, they don't have really any big games besides Utah. They lost to Creighton. They lost to Vanderbilt. They lost to Utah Valley. This was definitely a team we were looking at earlier in the season. I still think it's one you have to look at down the line, but I think Gonzaga is better than them. And really right now, it looks like Gonzaga is about to take over the one spot so long as they don't slip up here in next week's rankings. Gonzaga seems to be the shoe-in for the number one seed. So I'm going to take them and hope they don't blow it in this one, Matt. Gonzaga, BYU, what's your pick?
Yeah, I'm going to go Gonzaga as well, but look out for BYU. They can't take them lightly. I mean, you said it. They're 14-3, 2-0 in their conference. So, be careful.
Yep, that's for sure. All right, another game on here tonight. Colorado versus Arizona, the number one scoring offense in college basketball against Colorado. But Colorado, 11-3, 3-1 in conference. Arizona, 12-1, 2-0 in conference. A win here potentially for Colorado can move them up, I think, into third place of the Pac-12. And this has been a pretty solid team. I mean, the matchup predictor gives them just a 3.7% chance to pull the upset. They're 15.5-point underdogs. But I think this is a very good team. I just think on the other side, Benedict Mathurin is going to go off. He's going to have himself tonight. I'm going to take Arizona to pull on top. I think this is a team I want to see back inside my top 10 next week. I like their offense. They're freaking lethal, man. And their defense is allowing the same amount as Colorado. So I don't think Colorado has the offense to keep up. They're scoring about 15 points less. Actually, it was 17.5 points less per game coming into it. So I think the disparity is big enough to take Arizona pretty clean in this game.
Yeah, I got to take Arizona, too. The only player you kind of have to pay attention to for Colorado is Jabari Walker, averaging 13.4 points per game. That's not very high, but you never know what can happen. Arizona's tough defense is it's hard to get by.
Right. Next game up for us here. Pretty big kind of a coin flip here. This one comes on Saturday. Creighton, the Blue Jays versus Xavier. Xavier, 2 out of their 3 losses have come to Villanova in 2 of their last 3 games. They're coming off a pretty big hiatus as well. They hadn't played since the 21st. They've played 2 games so far, 1 on the 7th, 1 on the 12th. They're pretty much at this point averaging 1 game per week. And, you always worry about that, how it affects the team. And I definitely think you saw that against Villanova. But it was a 4-point loss for them. And both teams are coming off losses against that Villanova squad. It was 75-41. Creighton got smacked around. This one's in Cincinnati, Ohio. I like my in-state teams. Give me Xavier, man. They're a top 25 team. I want to see them roll higher.
Yeah, I like Xavier, too. I like what they've done. And, I'm going to roll with them, too. I like the in-state. That's kind of the big reason why I like rolling with them. But they're good, too. There's no reason to pick against them. They've had some tough losses. Creighton's a good team as well. But I think Xavier just will pull this one out, honestly.
Yep. All right. Well, once again, we got to go back to Seton Hall as they travel up to Wisconsin and take on Marquette, the Golden Eagles. Seton Hall, we knew that this start to January was going to be a big dent in their schedule, and we wanted to see how they were going to come out of it. So far, not too bad. They took a loss to Providence and Villanova to end December and start January, but they've had a win against Butler. They were in a tight one against UConn and went to overtime. They pulled a win. Marquette on the other side, their last loss came on January 1st to Creighton, who we just talked about a minute ago. Since then, they beat Providence. They beat Georgetown. They beat DePaul. This Marquette team, they're on their way back up, man. They were on a little bit of a slump there for a minute, but 3 straight games, I definitely think is the team coming back around in the Big East. This was a conference we had to look out for. They have, looks like right now, no teams with a losing record. Georgetown is 6-6. That's their worst team right now in the conference. DePaul is 0-5 in conference play, but they're still 9-6 overall. So definitely a conference to watch out for right now. And, when you compare the two in conference, Seton Hall, they're 2-2. Marquette, they're 3-3. So both teams looking to pick up a win here in Big East play. Matt, who are you going with in this one? I'll let you take the reins first.
I'm actually going to go Marquette here. I think Marquette's going to upset. They've lost some tough games. They lost, Xavier and, UCLA, but not by a lot, honestly. They took a loss to Wisconsin as well. They have put up points in those games. They've stayed with them. And, I think they can take it to Seton Hall and just, get the upset. I think they're a scrappy team. I like the players they have. And honestly, I think they could have a good run in the tournament. I like Justin Lewis and, Tyler Kolek. I think those guys are pretty good. So let's see what they can do. I think they can upset.
Matt, I really like Marquette in this game, but I got to be different from you at least one time today. So I'm going Seton Hall on the other side of this one. Our final game to wrap out the show, another game on Saturday, Tennessee, the Volunteers versus the Kentucky Wildcats. Big game here for the SEC, two of their top teams right now. And both teams have been performing all right. They haven't been fantastic. They haven't been bad, though. They're definitely on the higher side of where this conference sits. Kentucky in fourth place of the SEC. Tennessee down what looks like sixth place here. So I definitely think these two teams very evenly defensively. Kentucky, though, they got the upper hand offensively, and I think we kind of obviously knew that coming into this game of, Kentucky has always been an offensive powerhouse. I mean, they're a blue blood of the sport. They're just the team you always have to watch for. And Oscar Schwebwe averaging 17 points per game and 15.1 rebounds. That guy's a beast right now for Kentucky. He's their next big guy going to the NBA. I think he's going to have a career similar to that of Big Cat up there in Minnesota. I like this guy, and I got a feeling that Kentucky's coming away with the win here against Tennessee.
Yeah, I got to go Kentucky as well. And, that Tashibwe, he's definitely their next big guy. They've had a lot of good players going to the NBA, Devin Booker, plenty of more. So I think he's their next guy. Absolutely. So I got to go Kentucky as well.
All right, Matt. Well, before we finish out the show here, what do you got going on tonight here? High school preview. Give it to them real quick.
So I got the Badger Braves girls against the Matthews. Badger Braves, they're around that 500 mark. I think they're 5-6 again. Matthews is the same thing. I think they're 6-6. So this game could honestly go either way. Some players to look out for Badger. Katie Grexa is definitely their main point around the team, but I like I call them the Walker sisters, Samantha Walker and then the Miller sisters. My bad, Samantha Miller and Gabriella Miller. Gabriella can play great defense, a lot of steals, so look for her to get some turnovers for us, and just hopefully we'll have a pretty good game. I also like Addison Thompson. She can shoot, she can move around the ball. She's pretty much runs point when they want to put Grex into the shooting guard position or Grex is on the bench. So I like the little group of players they have. Hopefully they can pull out the win tonight. It should be a pretty good game, honestly. That's going to be like 6-15, so that's a start.
All right, well, Ursuline took my edition of the Holy War against Mooney. They pulled the plug on Mooney's great season. Cardinal Mooney, their two top guys that normally average 32 combined points per game, had just 2 in that game. They couldn't hit anything. Rocco Turner went, I believe, 0 for 7 from three-point range. He's their sharpshooter. He couldn't get anything to fall. Drew Pecchia was in foul trouble all game long. And Ursuline took the Holy War against Cardinal Mooney. Part 2 on this season comes February 11th. That one will be in Ursuline, so you got to make sure you tune into that when it comes down. Expect Mooney to come out shooting in that game. They should be fired up and ready to go in February. Other news for me, Lady Liberty, man, those Lady Liberty Leopards, 12-0, perfect to start the season. They're top 10 in the AP polls, top 10 in Division III on Max Preps. This is a team to watch out for, man. You gotta watch out for them rest of the season. But that's gonna do it here for the Casual Sports Podcast. I'm Alek Koberna. That's Matt Morrison. Power Hour up next. Stay tuned on YSNlive.com. We'll see you tomorrow to finish up another week here, the Casual Sports Podcast.